Yep, thank you so much for having me. A little bit of background about the Hamish and Andy show. They've been on air together for over 20 years. It was the biggest radio show in Australia for a very, very long time. At the height of their rating success in drive radio, 1 in 5 cars on Australian roads were listening to them every afternoon. 2.5 million listeners. They were nationally syndicated across 80 stations, plus sometimes in New Zealand, Dubai and the UK. They were interestingly early adopters of the podcast. They've been podcasting their radio show since 2006 and were consistently number 1 on the iTunes comedy charts during that time, with over 250 million downloads of their podcast during their radio days. In 2018, they finished up full-time radio and made the interesting transition to full-time podcasting. So we now do a weekly podcast, as Hamish likes to say, 40 eps a year for 40 years, while they've just started year number 8 last week without me, unfortunately, but I'll be back there next week to help them out with that. There's also a third member of the Hamish and Andy team on the air, that's Jack Post. He started off as a panel operator for the show back on the radio days. He's now very much a third member of the podcast, and he still panels, very badly though. I've been with them for the last 15 years across radio and podcast, mainly looking after all their audio and sound design needs as the creative producer on the show. So that's a little bit about them. This is not my first conference. I thought I'd start with an example for you of something we did as a story arc at the end of last year. Back in June 2024, they were playing a game on the podcast where Hamish was challenging Andy and Jack to come up with tax deductions for various industries in the space of 30 seconds. He'd say painter, and they'd have 30 seconds to try and come up with tax deductions. They kept trying to deduct overseas holidays, and then we ran it past their accountant, and their accountant was striking out what would or wouldn't pass the bar. But one of their accountant's answers about overseas holidays left them quite intrigued. And the next week on the podcast, this is what happened.
John, our tax accountant, as you guys were trying to weasel through overseas holidays as a legitimate tax deduction, he did sort of draw the line there, even though, Jack, if I remember correctly, you made the very, very well-argued link between a painter going on a holiday to a colourful country and a necessary business expense. But he did push back on that, on just a free-for-all holiday. But he did keep saying,
conferences.
If you're going for a conference, that's okay.
He'd do it in a muttering way to himself, which made it think, I suppose if it's a conference.
It came up time and time again.
It just seemed like it's the world's greatest tax write-off.
Yep.
Conference.
So we think that we should provide that for everybody.
Well,
an
we were like,
opportunity.
okay, surely there's other people in the situation that aren't utilising conferences as a great way to claim some expenses.
So we'd
And
like...
a legitimate way too, because, so we're not saying, hey, just pretend you went to a conference.
No, no, no.
We were like, what if we can provide the conference?
that will have a specific segment on your line of work. So it's completely legitimate.
Yep.
Conference for all.
The conference for all. Okay. And for all a conference.
So that's what we did. We created a conference for all where we guaranteed to talk about your industry so that you could claim it back on tax. For at least a minute, I think we said we'd talk about your industry. This is what they called it. Not attracting the attention of the Australian Tax Office at all. So we started to build the journey of ConCon towards the end of the year. For example, what do all conferences needed? Well, according to Hamish, loads and loads of biscuits. He got so obsessed with biscuits, there was a whole hour in the program dedicated to biscuits. Honestly, the biscuit chat went on for months and months. We booked a venue on the Gold Coast, the Royal Pines Golf Club and Resort. The golf part of that was very intentional for the boys to enjoy part of their tax break weekend. And they started preparing their presentations to talk about every industry. A few months in, we did get an official letter from the Deputy Secretary of the Australian Tax Office questioning a few of the things we may have said on air. So we did have to pivot a little bit some of the ideas that we had planned. I did find it amusing that they quoted in that letter the opener for the segment, which was a conference so nice you can deduct it twice. The fact that they quoted that and told us that was tax fraud and not possible meant that they had sat around a boardroom in Canberra listening to the podcast and quoting it back to us. Anyway, we were all above board. We had to make sure that the conference was going to be very educational, not at all comedic, not at all entertaining. It was there to be educational, and that's what would make it tax deductible. But it was only going to be that if people decided to come, and boy, they did. Tickets sold out in under an hour. 300 legends turned up to the Gold Coast for this, and here's a little bit of how it went.
This will be an absolute avalanche of education.
Every industry will be covered, hence tax deductible for all of you.
Recently got into a new industry and I needed to sort of develop myself professionally, so I thought coming to ConCon would be a great chance to do that.
Probably no fun will be had, but that's okay. It's a conference. It's all about learning.
I think I've taken a lot of things out of this and will be using them to accelerate my career further.
We've done a lot of networking, made a lot of business connections over beers and biscuits.
Can you please welcome your keynote speakers, Andy Lee, Hamish Blake, and Jack Post.
Ground rules for today, this will not be entertaining.
This is an educational experience so powerful, you will walk out of here into the first recess / biscuit break with your mind blown. I think this can apply to everyone.
Is fast food good for athletes? You might think yes, but the data tells a different story.
So yes, that was ConCon, a fun few days on the Gold Coast. I wanted to start off with that because I think it's a great example of the sorts of story arcs that we do on the show, and I'm going to keep coming back to it as I take you through our 10 secret sources for podcast success, and it is something that kind of embodies all of them. So what are they? Preparation, team, DNA, authenticity, respect, quality over quantity, the journey, playing to your strengths, fun, and loyalty. So they're the 10 things I'm going to take you through over the next little while and talk about how the Hamish and Andy show embodies those. Now, why is secret in quotation marks? Well, as you can see, they're pretty simple concepts. They're not groundbreaking in any way, and the boys and lots of other people on the show have talked about them lots at various venues and conferences like this over the years, so they're not really that secret. But we think this is what goes into making a super successful radio show and then podcast. All right, let's get into it. Preparation. Here's a bit of an example of what goes into the prep for our show on a week-to-week basis. Hamish and Andy are involved in all of this, despite Hamish's best efforts. And 70% of our work is prep. This is planning meetings before the show, on the day before, a planning meeting before record day, post-show meetings to go over edits, timings, shuffling running orders, that sort of thing. But it's not just on the day of the show either. They're back and forth for days over email and other planning events. We try to keep podcast record day as sacred as possible with so much of the prep done before that so that we can keep the vibe up and keep the fun in the studio on the day that we're recording. In our meetings, we have a split of business and content, And we always do content first so that we can, again, do the stuff we're most excited about, talk about the ideas we want to talk about on the air and get that vibe up. And then what we call business, we do at the end. So that's the logistics of who needs to travel where, what studios we've booked, you know, who's got a press interview this week, that sort of stuff. That comes at the end, and if we don't get to it, we don't get to it. We also make sure to do extra meetings before big content arcs and have explicit plans on how we're going to capture things when we're out and about, because so much of it is important that we capture it the right way. Before I joined the show many years ago, typically audio producers didn't go out with the show. A producer might go and put a recording, an old Tascam or something in the middle of a desk and set it rolling for 3 hours and then come back and say, oh, it was all pretty good, see what you can make of it. So I really pushed to be a part of the show going out on the road. One, to make sure that we recorded properly and put together a suite of gear that we could record properly when we were out and about, but also it meant that the edit for the package on the way back was already half done in my head before we even got back to a studio. And often we'd be on the road for a week or more, and so I'm editing on the road as we go and we're doing shows as we go. We also take the time to review and have meetings after big story arcs to learn how it went, take a look at what happened, what are the lessons we can learn for next time. So all of that stuff is super important to help prep your show into the future. And a note, again, from an audio producer like myself, do some prep for your future self. Keep everything, and a comprehensive archive system. Whenever I make promos or montages or packages, I make sure to bounce out cold stems of everything within it and label them comprehensively. Then at the end of the week, the month, the year, whenever you're looking to make another package, you've already got a searchable database of the best and funniest moments cold that you can reuse. We also made sure to very much so document the show and keep that. So the executive producers kept rundowns of every show and we kept them for 20 years. And obviously kept the show in itself. And we've turned that into a couple of things. One, a separate revenue stream on Apple Podcasts behind a paywall. You can listen to the whole back catalogue of their radio years because we've managed to keep and catalogue all of that material. And we made a whole second podcast series called The Remembering Project, which is where they go back and try and remember the things they did on radio all those years ago, and we play back some specific audio from those times. But we can only do that because we have the run sheets. So do some prep for your future self and make sure you spend a little bit of time each day cataloguing and archiving what you're putting so much time into. And of course, with the advent of AI, that's going to be a lot easier because you can get transcripts and feed and summaries and all those sorts of stuff to keep those archives for you. Number 2, team. Our long-time executive producer, Sam Kavanagh, who is now also the head of entertainment content for Listener, always had a saying which was 50% of his work was focused on the team and 50% on content. So that's all about supporting the team and creating the culture and environment for us to do our best work. Within the show, we never dwell on an issue. If something doesn't go to plan on the air or someone feels unsupported, they're always going to have that tough or honest conversation as soon as possible. Not during the record or during the show, but as soon as possible afterwards. We've always found that's the easiest way to learn the lesson and create a new plan to change behaviour for next time and move on quickly. We know that resentment and distrust rots a team from the inside out. And one of my favourite sayings is high-performing teams move at the speed of trust. So building that trust over a long period of time and having a singular focus on it has certainly been one of the big things that we've had with this show. We also do check-ins before we do big events or before we go on the road for story arcs, because we know we're going to be living in each other's pockets for a period of time, and we just want to know, what do you need from me to perform at your best while we're doing this? What's happening in your life? How do we get the best out of something we've been planning for months? Next, DNA. Find your show's DNA. At its core, what makes your show what it is. When you find that, it's a filter through which all your content decisions can be made. We still start every year with kind of a blue sky SWOT analysis meeting where we look back at the last year's and previous year's shows and what are our strengths and weaknesses, what worked, what isn't, where can we improve. You know, after 20 years together, that's still pretty remarkable to have such a growth mindset about what they want to do. And something came up in this year's one, which was only a couple of weeks ago, where we struck upon a shared value that resonated with everyone in the team. And it'll be a good reminder this year as we make the pod, which was to embrace the silly. So embracing the silly is going to be our bit of a North Star this year as we move through making the episodes. And it's a great prompt for when we're stuck in the loop of meetings and sales and all of that sort of stuff, to embrace the silly, because only the good content comes from that. In terms of finding the DNA on our show, it can take some time. It's not going to be instant on day one of your first episode of the pod. It took a couple of years on radio for the guys to find what theirs was. But we struck upon this phrase, which was the people's show. And that was the filter through which we made all the content decisions for Hamish and Andy. Here's a couple of examples of how that comes to life. This was a crowd surf show where they did the entire 2-hour radio show surfing the crowd. And the listeners that came along literally held them up for 2 hours. Musician Amy Shark came and sang and crowd surfed as well during her song. This is an older one going back to 2008. The People's Chip. This created pandemonium in Australia. Back in those days, there weren't that many chip flavours. Now it's insane. But this was one of the first times where Smiths were allowing an out-of-the-box flavour, and they allowed the boys and Australia to help choose what that was going to be. So they went through many months of flavour testing, and when they finally decided on gravy, then it was what type of gravy. Is it going to be chicken or beef or various others? And when the gravy chip did come out, it created pandemonium on the streets and in the supermarkets of people trying to get their hands on the gravy chip. But perhaps their greatest example of taking the show to the people was the Caravan of Courage. This was something early on in their radio days where they actually wanted to get out and touch Australia, as they said. So they bought a caravan and travelled across from the west to the east for 2 weeks, stopping in small towns along the way, meeting characters of Australia and broadcasting live every afternoon from somewhere else along the way. The unique thing of it was that we wanted our audience to join us too. So everyone was free to hook up their caravan or camper van and join the trip, road trip west, from west to east, sorry. The only deal was if you joined it, you had to join it from start to end. But we had a whole bunch of legends joining us at caravan parks every evening as we did the show. And this became such a successful thing that we did it multiple times across Australia. They went across the US, they went across UK and Ireland as well, and is probably the precursor to a lot of their kind of travel TV shows that they've done over the years. The other thing about finding your DNA is knowing your show's brand and tone of voice and protecting that, even in commercial relationships. The boys have never not delivered for a client. In fact, we're sold out already for this entire year. But that's because they know the tone of voice for their show. They write all of the scripts for the ads that appear in their show so that they can protect their brand identity and their tone of voice. Or they've empowered 1 or 2 brand warriors within their team that can write in their voice. But they're very protective of what our show stands for, what the sound of it is, and that goes a long way to maintaining the integrity of the show. Authenticity. The guys are authentic on the air because their reactions are genuine. They don't know what is coming. This doesn't mean that they don't plan or prep, as we've talked about, and it doesn't mean it's all spontaneous, even though Hamish is one of the quickest wits I've ever come across. But it means it's not rehearsed or pantomime. They are very conscious of protecting that sacred on-air space and know that the audience can sniff out a performance. So how do we do this? Well, their emails are split 50-50. So if you email our show, as they come in, half the emails go to Hamish, half the emails go to Andy. All of the emails go to the producers, so we have some idea of what's going on. But if you've emailed the show and one of the boys wants to bring a point you've made up or tell your story on the air, the other one doesn't know it's coming because there's no way they could have seen the email. We have secret code words on run sheets and in the playback computer so that people don't know what's coming up in the next break. We kick people out of the room during the planning meeting so they can pitch their content without the other one hearing. It doesn't mean there is not content where they are both aware or they do know what the plan is or what's coming up. When it comes to ConCon, say for example, everyone knows the broad plan of what is happening. But if Hamish has got a funny email about biscuits or something that's come to him during the week about that, then Andy and Jack won't know what's coming in that instance. And that keeps that on-air reaction super genuine and in the moment. And why does this work? Well, it's from that trust that we've spent so much time building up and talking about, and trusting that even if half the show is a secret to you, we've got your best interests at heart. Also, I want to make the point that authentic doesn't mean not curated. Saw some posts about podcasts of, more than an hour conversation that's unedited, and that being true authentic podcasting. But we're of the feeling that very few conversations are 100% engaging. Our show is highly edited and meticulously planned, but we know that the raw material is as authentic as possible, and that's what helps make it. I want to play an example of the trust and on-air authenticity. This is from a few years ago where we asked Andy to sign a contract on air, not knowing what he was signing or why. It had been 6 months of work from Hamish in the build-up to it, and this is what happened when he signed the contract.
Edit side.
What I'm about to pull out of this cardboard box is a real product. This is the prototype, but there's many thousands being created as we speak that are going to be rolling into stores, into a specific store I'll tell you in a second. Just as I look at the product now in the box that you can't see it, I'm holding in my hand for the first time. I know it's the right thing to have done. Congratulations, Ando. I'm handing you your very own signature fragrance, Andy, by Hamish. I have created a fragrance for you, 5,000 bottles of which are being manufactured, which will be going exclusively into Chemist Warehouse in time for Father's Day.
This is so disappointing. God.
He loves it. He loves it.
So Andy by Hamish went on to become the fastest selling fragrance in Chemist Warehouse's history. But yeah, full trust from Andy. We had many meetings in the lead up to go, how is he going to react to that? But we took his genuine reaction, which was disappointment. But the audience still loved it and bought it. Speaking of the audience, number 5, respect your audience. We've talked a lot about trust, and that goes hand in hand with respect. If you respect your audience, they'll respect you and they'll contribute. We're constantly reminded that our audience are endlessly funnier than we are. And something I'm in awe of the boys over the years is that they make sure every interaction with a listener is a positive one. They always make time for a photo with a listener. They have a deal in the podcast that if you see them in the street, they can give you $1, or if they don't have $1 on them, they'll give you a bow. They make people feel part of the club. The listener interaction and the community that we built over the years on the radio show was something that was top of mind when we were transitioning to a podcast. And so it is absolutely a point that we aim to have callers and listener interaction in every pod. It's critical. Respecting their contributions and acknowledging them in the podcast just leads to an avalanche of contributions. They feel ownership over the show and they want to contribute. And they'll tell us honestly when they think we've broken that trust or if there's something they just don't like. They're at the heart of everything we do, and we've always tried to build unique experiences that they can be a part of. Here's an example of one of those experiences in the podcast. Have you ever wondered what it's like to evacuate a plane via an emergency slide? Probably you hope you never have to know what that is, but we were still intrigued as to what it might be like. So we gave 100 listeners that experience without the need for a mid-air emergency.
This is tough.
Welcome to the inaugural Hamish and Andy slide party plane.
Vicky, go for it.
Hop off quickly, hop off quickly, hop off quickly. She's checking, she's checked. Yep. She's opened it. Oh my God. Oh, look at that Watch it go! Oh, wow! That is awesome. Slide true, slide well.
Okay, I'm getting on the slide.
yep.
It looks like a slide. It
Lean
feels like
forward,
a slide.
grip your
Lean
knees.
side, click knees.
How do you feel, Andy?
I feel like I'm sliding. And a perfect dismount.
What a landing.
Apparently $30,000 per deployment of those slides. They're one use only. I'm not going to comment on the fact that that airline has now gone out of business. Let's talk about respecting our audience in respect to ConCon. On the flight up to the Gold Coast for ConCon, seated next to us on the plane were a couple who had booked plane tickets and accommodation, but in the rush had missed out on tickets to ConCon, but had decided to fly up anyway to just enjoy the weekend and try and get some of the vibe. Truly amazing dedication from them. We managed to sneak them a couple of tickets to get in up the back. At the ConCon networking drinks, everyone got up, dressed up, mingled, really got into the networking. We're told that several people in different industries have already agreed to collab on work together. Amazing, not something we thought was going to happen. But more so the respect that the boys showed to everyone that turned up and made an effort and paid a lot of money to be there, frankly. They stood for 3 hours solid in that networking drinks and took a photo and heard a story with every single listener that turned up to that event. They signed merch, they listened to stories. Every one of those listeners left with a positive experience. And if you want a true indication of the dedication of some of our listeners, this was the ConCon tat that two of our listeners got. So they'll remember ConCon forever. Quality over quantity. This is the strategy that informs all of our content decisions. It's our audio strategy, our digital strategy, our merch strategy. We prioritise quality over quantity in how often we post on social media and also what we post. We always go the extra effort to make sure what we're posting is of the highest quality. Our merch has very limited drops. It always has a reason for being. It's come out of something, a story or something in the show. It's not just an endless catalogue of coffee mugs with the name of the show on it. In terms of content ideas, we're very good at knowing the shelf life of something. We recognise the value of our content, and we also know when we've kicked the fun out of it, and we never want to be, working on something past its due date. We'll also listen to the feedback from our audience about when that might be happening. We're constantly checking in on the elements of the show or the benchmarks which are still working, and we trust our filter for when we think we've done something too much. But part of that also means that some breaks don't make it to air. Inbuilt Q&A for your show is something that's vitally important. Just because you've recorded it or put some effort into it doesn't mean it has to go out. We also recognise, though, when a segment is endlessly reusable and adaptable. Something for our show is the special skill. So back when we started the podcast 8 years ago, we put a form up on the website just to really get a database of our listeners, because we knew that being a podcast, we were going to need to call on them at various times, and because we couldn't have live callers, we'd be calling out. So if we ever needed a lawyer to answer a legal question or something like that, we'd rather find one of our listeners who did that than call someone random. And on that form, we had one question down the bottom that said, "What is your special skill?" And it was a throwaway question that we weren't thinking much about, but the answers that flowed in after that were truly something to behold. The special skills that our listeners claimed to have truly needed to be tested. And so it's our longest running segment on the podcast where we are flying people in on the cheapest available flight to test their special skill in front of us and prove that they can do it. Here is one of those.
Are they in a clump and you're squeezing them all together?
They're in two clumps. It's a double clump.
Wow.
They're on. Are they layers?
Have you patented
The double clump?
Hang on, are you stacking Are you stacking 2 layers?
I'm holding 2 layers.
How many on the bottom tier? How many on the top
There's
tier?
7 on the top and 5 underneath.
Whoa,
Which seems odd. I know.
heavy. So
the
are
only
you
way it can be
actually
confusing.
grabbing underneath, almost like a firefighting helicopter holds the bucket?
Similar, yeah.
How are you feeling, Nick?
I think they're in the right spot. Yeah.
Happy. Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, here we go. So he's holding it looks like he's holding the top layer very low down. Here we go. The first 7 are in the air.
The 7 are on top of the 5.
So now he lands
Is then
those
7
on
top of
top.
5. Oh, Jesus. This is the worry, isn't
Okay,
it?
I don't believe this is possible. Oh my god. Oh my god. The bartender just held her mouth. The bartender. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Now, this is the hard part. This is the
7
dismount.
beers on top of 5.
They land.
This is the dismount. He's landed it well. The 5 are down.
5 are
the
down.
7 are up. I don't think there was a single drip on the ground. And he somehow landed them. I think he got it all. This is amazing. It's done it. He's done it.
So the quality over quantity also extends to the effort to make those regular segments sing every time. We obviously flew him in, we rented a pub, we got 12 people from the office to come across, so it was a real life scenario. We laid paper on the ground to check if he'd made any drips. All of those things go together, those little details help tell the whole story and allow the listener to shine in those moments. Number 7, the journey. The journey is the fun. While the ultimate destination is great, it's all the world building along the way where our greatest gold comes from. And it also means that you can still enjoy an idea if it doesn't end up where you thought it would. You have to know when to pivot. A great example of that is the race that slows down the nation. The boys had the idea to have a horse race before one of Australia's most famous horse races, the Melbourne Cup. The day before, they wanted to have a horse race between all sorts of different horses. So they wanted to race a Clydesdale against a donkey, against a Shetland, against a thoroughbred. It became fairly obvious as we talked on the air to lots of horsey people that that wasn't going to happen. They said the thoroughbred will refuse to run, the donkey won't run against a Clydesdale, all of that sort of thing. So we pivoted the idea and went, what could be just as funny? Well, maybe 50 humans dressed as horses racing. And so the race that slows
They
down
didn't
the
just
nation.
come for a race. They came for their place in history.
A 50-person horse-suit race that would bring a nation not to a standstill, but certainly to a dawdle. It was the race that slows down the nation.
Unfortunately, I don't have time to play the whole video. It is an epic one. I encourage you to go on YouTube and watch that one. It was a country town where we hired the race course, a country town of 500 people in outback Australia that swelled when 12,000 people turned up to watch it. So just an example of the journey being part of the fun. Part of the journey to get to ConCon is also the fun. Along the way, the jokes started to roll in from our listeners. Someone suggested ConCon condoms. So they got made. Given the price we paid from the merchandiser, I wouldn't have trusted them. As mentioned before, Hamish was obsessed with biscuits. There were thousands of biscuits. We got a famous Australian biscuit maker, Arnott's, to sponsor it, and they sent thousands of biscuits. There were so many biscuits per person, it was unbelievable, but it did take over the show. In fact, we got alerted to a local cover band who were named after an Arnott's biscuit called Kingston Crumb, and they offered to come and play biscuit-themed covers during Biscuit Hour, so they did that. And then the music didn't stop there, because international pop star Conrad Sewell wanted to come and be Conrad, and offered to change the lyrics to his latest hit single to be all business-related. And then there was a PowerPoint presentation behind him while he sang it live for the crew at the end of ConCon. So just some of the fun that comes up as we're progressing a journey across months. Number 8, as I'm running out of time, play to your strengths. Hamish and Andy are very different people and very different performers. That, along with their unique chemistry, is what makes the show work. Andy recognised this early on. There's certainly not many comedy brains quite like Hamish Blake's. And Andy realised his role would more often than not to be the straight man or the foil. And he embraced that. The boys certainly celebrate their differences and their strengths and what they bring to the table in the show. We also do that within the team. We're encouraged to find what our role is within the team, and we have different producers working with different talent, those that complement each other's strengths and weaknesses as well. Even how I collaborate with Hamish and Andy is different. With Andy, if I'm working on a piece of content, I know we're going to be probably working on it a couple of weeks ahead. We're going to do several drafts over email, send it backwards and forwards until we work it into a place that we're both happy with. With Haim, I know that my best chance to get something to him is the moment that he's in front of me in the booth, and I can throw ideas at him and we riff from there. The biggest thing for this, though, within the show is that the boys and the team knows that the value of something doesn't equal how much time was spent on it. So whether it's Andy spending endless hours in a meeting in the lead up to ConCon, or whether it's Hamish writing a funny jingle for 5 minutes before we went on air, both of them have equal value and help propel the story and the show forward. And so we don't attach more value to one or the other, all of it is of value to the show. Number 9, fun. Make time for it, schedule it. This is a photo from our end-of-year jet ski trip as a team. We do office pranks that are not for on air, just on each other. You may have seen in the prep slide earlier on, one of the bar graphs was labelled as gossip. This is the first thing we do in the planning meeting. They often look forward to it more than the planning meeting itself. They love a good gossip. They celebrate birthdays, lunches and dinners. Our WhatsApp group is out of control. They've turned employee recognition within the team into a game whereby the weekly prize for best on ground gets awarded a prize, and then there's a game where you're able to steal that prize off them. All this builds the culture. They and we genuinely love it. They love the culture of the show so much, they purposely don't talk to each other over the summer break so that they can hold on to the stories and tell each other those stories on the air when they start back in March. And all of those things we've talked about breed loyalty. Find your people. They've built their success off small teams, often starting with their mates and bringing on experts in their field. If you can breed the trust and loyalty of a great team, that'll bleed through to all other aspects of your show. It'll bleed through to an extremely loyal audience base who will spend thousands of dollars to travel to a fake conference on the Gold Coast. It'll bleed through to a very loyal advertising base where we see lots of return customers and return clients. And bleeds through to loyalty to the organisation. They've spent their entire career at SCA and Listener. So as a quick recap, preparation. Over 70% of our work is prep. The guys hold on for content for the right moment. They don't ever want to burn an idea in the room if they don't think it's going to get used. And prep a great archive system. Your future self will thank you. 50% team, 50% content. Build that trust, never dwell on an issue, and high-performing teams move at the speed of trust. Find your DNA. It's the content filter through which all your decisions can be made. It can take some time to find it, but once you know your brand and your tone of voice, protect it. Authenticity. Keep secrets from each other to reveal in the sacred on-air space and make those on-air reactions authentic. Maybe split your show emails. And remembering that authentic doesn't mean not edited or planned. Respect your audience and they'll contribute. Make every interaction a positive one and build unique experiences for them and they'll keep coming back and contributing. Quality over quantity. Inform your strategy across all aspects of content, social and merch. Know the shelf life of an idea, and QA is important. Not every break has to go to air. The journey. The journey's more fun than the destination. All the world building is where the gold lies, and know when to pivot an idea. Play to your strengths, learn how to collaborate with different talent, find your role within the team, and the value of something isn't how much time it takes. Make time for and schedule your fun. Build your team and find your people that'll bleed through to your audiences, clients and organisation. This is a high-performing team and show at the top of its game for 20 years that continues to reinvent itself. It never rests on its laurels, and all of these 10 things take a lot of time and work to cultivate, but they also contribute to the longevity. And what you end up with together is something we think is pretty special. Here's Hamish to talk about it.
G'day everyone, Hamish Blake here. I hope you've enjoyed Marshy's talk. Working with Hamish, why it's changed my life and why he's such a great guy. That's the working title he told me. I hope he went with it. No, seriously, I hope you've enjoyed Marshy's talk. He's been with us for so many of our adventures. There's no one more qualified to talk about what we do than Marshy. And look, at the end of it all, if you'll allow me to end on a bit of a sentimental note, when he asked me to, can I make a video for the end of this? I sort of thought, we've done what Andy and I do for a long time now. And, sometimes you get to this end of, well, I hope it's not the end of the career, but this stage of your career and you go, why do we do it? And what's the actual reason to keep doing it? And for me personally, I reckon it comes down to, if you've created a situation where you get to do something that you love, you get to create something, you get to put something into the world that wasn't there before, be it big or small, and you A, enjoy doing it, and B, enjoy the people you do it with, I think that's a pretty good measure of success. I think we all know it's not about chasing sort of an end state. You never want to be stuck in a day-to-day situation you hate, hoping that the payoff will be worth it. For us, it's always the reward is the doing. It's the process. Making sure that, that it's how you spend your day that actually counts at the end of it. So we've been so lucky to spend our days doing the thing we love, and then Marshy makes it sound 400 times better, so we can not get axed and we get to keep doing it. So, if this is still rolling, Marshy might have just edited this down to go. I made it just sort of petered out, so I just did a music score and I wrapped it up early, in which case, that's why he's the best.
So thank you. It's a long way to come from Australia just to remind you to embrace the silly, but it's been a pleasure meeting lots of people over the last few days and having great conversations about radio and podcasting and audio. It is still obviously such a thriving industry and we love it. Please make sure you go and subscribe to the Hamish and Andy podcast and register early for ConCon 2025 if the bloody tax office lets us do it. Thank you.
Chris. That was absolutely fabulous. I mean, that top 10, I think, is something we can all take away. I mean, it really is a top 10 that's sort of universal, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the point. They're not hard concepts to get your head around, but they do take a lot of time and effort and work and focus to prioritise them in what you're doing.
Yeah.
But when you do that, what we found is the rewards are huge.
What I found interesting too is talking to a lot of people that sometimes, well, there's quite a few radio stations that do this, but a lot of radio stations don't do the team building thing. People come in, do their show, they see the person before and after them, and if they're doing it voice track, they don't see anybody. But to make that effort to do things like you've done, all those incredible activities to build rapport, I mean, it's so valuable. And that's really impressive.
Yeah, that key one, as I said, that high-performing teams move at the speed of trust. So you have to consciously make effort to build that trust. And from that, all the benefits of great on-air content flow.
Fantastic. Chris Marsh, thank you very much indeed. Give him another round of applause. From Southern Cross to Stereo. Brilliant. Thank you, man. Right, we're into the closing stages. Short break, then we're all back in this room. This will be the only room working for the next sort of 45 minutes. We've got Nick's going to do 30 ideas in 45 minutes, so more great takeaways. If your boss says, what did you learn during radio days? This next session could be the answer to that when you get back to whatever you're doing in your station. And then we're going to announce where we're going to be in 2026. So see you back in here in about 10 minutes or so. And talking of which...